Before you judge what you're about to hear, ask yourself this question: how far would you go to save your child's life? Welcome back to Tales in the Day by Nk. Maria Femi discovered that love doesn't follow the law, and sometimes the greatest crimes are committed by the purest hearts. The handcuffs clicked around her trembling wrist at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, but her real story began 6 months earlier when desperation became her only companion and theft became her prayer. Listen carefully, because Maria Femi wasn't born a criminal. She was born a mother, and sometimes that's the most dangerous thing you can be in a world that prizes miracles beyond a mother's reach. Picture this woman, 45 years old, hands permanently stained with industrial cleaning chemicals, back bent from years of scrubbing floors that would never be clean enough to reflect her worth. She moved through Sacred Heart Hospital like a ghost, invisible to the doctors who saved lives and the patients who got second chances. But Maria was just the woman who emptied their trash. Every morning at 4 a.m., her alarm would pierce through dreams to wake her up. In the cracked mirror of her bathroom, she practiced the smile she'd wear all day, the smile that said, "I'm fine," when everything was falling apart. The apartment told her real story. Rent notices stacked like threatening prayers. Medical bills that grew faster than weeds, each one another brick in the wall between her daughter and survival. Photos covered the water stains on the walls: Sophia at 6, missing her front teeth but grinning like she owned the world. Sophia at 7, smaller than other kids but fierce as lightning. Sophia at 8, in a hospital bed, still smiling because that's what children do when their mothers are watching. Sophia Elena Femi. Remember that name, because she's the reason everything that follows makes sense and breaks your heart at the same time. 8 years old, with her mother's determined chin and her father's absent eyes, he'd vanished when the diagnosis came, leaving behind only empty promises and emptier bank accounts. Sophia had Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome, a genetic disorder that aged her tiny body at 8 times the normal rate. While other children worried about homework, Sophia's body was racing toward a finish line no child should see. The medical bills read like ransom notes: 2 million naira for treatments that bought months. 4 million naira for procedures that bought hope. 10 million naira for an experimental therapy that could buy Sophia a childhood. Maria made 18,250,000 a year cleaning up after people who spent more on lunch than she made in a week. The mathematics of love don't add up when insurance companies hold the calculators. December 3rd changed everything. Maria sat in Dr. Peterson's office, the same office she'd cleaned 1,000 times, but now she sat in the chair where desperate families received impossible news. The doctor's words hit like physical blows: without the new treatment, Sophia has maybe 6 months. With it, she could have years, maybe decades. But the insurance has denied coverage for experimental therapies. 6 months. The number echoed in Maria's head as she walked through the hospital corridors she knew better than her own home. 6 months while the medicine that could save Sophia sat locked in a pharmacy 30 feet from where she mopped floors every night. 6 months while bureaucrats in offices she'd never see decided her daughter's life wasn't worth their risk. That night, Maria held Sophia as she slept, counting each precious breath. Sophia's hair had started falling out again, and her skin looked paper-thin in the glow of their single lamp. Maria whispered promises into the darkness: "I won't let you go, my love. I won't let this world take you from me." But promises don't pay for miracles, and miracles have price tags that mock a mother's love. The breaking point came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday night in December. Maria was cleaning the pharmacy, the same routine she'd done for 3 years. But this time, she stopped. She stared at the locked cabinet that held Sophia's salvation. Her hands, rough from years of honest work, trembled as she touched the cold metal. Inside that cabinet was liquid hope, vials of possibility, bottles of borrowed time with her daughter. The security camera blinked red in the corner. James, the night guard, trusted her completely. He'd often say, "Maria's the only one I don't have to watch. That woman's got more integrity than the rest of us combined." The irony would haunt her later. The lock wasn't complicated. Hospital security focused on keeping people out, not keeping desperate mothers from breaking in. That first night, Maria just stared. She memorized every detail, the way the light fell across the medicine shelves, the soft hum of the refrigeration units, the sound of her own heartbeat drowning out the hospital's mechanical breathing. She thought about Sophia's laugh, the way it sounded like music even when her small body was failing. She thought about the mother she wanted to be versus the woman desperation was forcing her to become. The debtors arrived the next day, and letters from the insurance company. Maria read them sitting on her kitchen floor, surrounded by overdue bills and collection notices, the paper shaking in her hands as the words blurred together. After careful review, we have determined that the requested treatment is experimental and not covered under your current policy. Careful review. As if Sophia's life was just another line item in their quarterly reports. As if her daughter's future was worth less than their profit margins. Maria understood then that the system wasn't broken, it was working exactly as designed, just not for people like her. Sleep became impossible. Maria would lie awake calculating, how many hours did she need to work to afford one vial? How many floors did she need to scrub to buy her daughter one more month? The mathematics of desperation have no solutions, only consequences. By January, Sophia was weaker. Her appetite vanished, and her energy followed. She'd stopped asking when she'd feel better, because children know when adults stop having answers. The plan formed slowly, like a tumor of necessity growing in Maria's conscience. She began paying attention to things she'd never noticed before, when deliveries arrived, how inventory was tracked, which medications were counted daily and which were assumed safe. She learned the pharmacy's rhythms like a song she was afraid to sing. If you're a parent watching this, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is about to take a turn that will challenge everything you think you know about right and wrong. And here's my question for you. If you had to choose between your child's life and obeying the law, which would you choose? Let me know in the comments, because Maria Femi was about to find out there are some choices that change you forever. January 15th, 2:15 a.m. Maria Femi crossed a line that had been drawn by desperation and erased by love. The pharmacy lock clicked open with the same sound as her daughter's labored breathing, quiet, almost imperceptible, but impossible to ignore once you hear it. Her hands, steady from years of precise cleaning, carefully selected one vial of Lonafanib, the experimental drug that could slow Sophia's aging process. One vial worth 800,000 naira, one vial that could buy her daughter 2 more weeks of childhood. The weight of that small glass container felt heavier than all the years of honest work behind her. Maria had never stolen anything in her life, not candy as a child, not time as an employee, not hope as a mother until now. She tucked the vial into her cleaning cart beneath the industrial paper towels, her heart hammering so loud she was certain it would wake the entire hospital. Sophia's first dose was administered with shaking hands and whispered prayers. Maria had researched dosages for weeks, reading medical journals on library computers, memorizing side effects and interactions. She became an expert in her daughter's salvation, a scholar of stolen hope. Within days, Sophia's energy returned like a small miracle. She asked if could help with dinner, laughed at cartoons, colored pictures that stayed inside the lines again. "Mommy, I feel better," Sophia whispered one morning, and those 4 words justified every sleepless night, every racing heartbeat, every moment of guilt that would follow. Maria kissed her daughter's forehead, crying but tears of joy, and knew she would steal the sun itself if Sofia needed its warmth. The second theft came easier. Maria studied pharmacy like a doctoral thesis in survival. She memorized which medicines were counted weekly versus monthly, learned which vials could disappear without triggering immediate inventory alerts. She became intimate with the hospital's blind spots, both architectural and administrative. James Patterson, the night security guard, became her unwitting accomplice through trust. 52 years old with grandchildren Sofia's age, he'd grown fond of Maria over the years. "You're the hardest worker in this place," he'd tell her, bringing her coffee during long shifts. "Never missed a day, never complained about overtime. This hospital's lucky to have you." The irony cut deeper each night. James would unlock doors for her, help her move heavy equipment, never suspecting that his kindness was enabling her crimes. Maria began to understand how trust could be a weapon turned against good people, how desperation could transform virtue into vulnerability. But Sofia was getting stronger, and that reality outweighed every other moral consideration. By March, Maria had developed a system. She'd identify medications with the longest inventory cycles, take amounts that fell within acceptable loss margins, and always from different suppliers to avoid patterns. She became a criminal with the precision of a surgeon and the motivation of a mother watching her child return from the edge of death. Sofia started gaining weight. Her hair stopped falling out in clumps. She began talking about her future again, what she wanted to be when she grew up, places she wanted to visit, friends she wanted to make. Each dream was a small theft justified, each hope a crime made holy by its outcome. Maria watched her daughter transform from a dying child into a living one, and the guilt became easier to carry when weighed against such miraculous results. The medication routine became a sacred ritual. Every dose measured with pharmaceutical precision, every improvement documented with a mother's scientific devotion. Maria kept detailed records hidden in Sofia's bedroom closet: dates, dosages, improvements, side effects. She'd become her daughter's unlicensed physician, her unauthorized pharmacist, her illegal savior. In the month of April, Dr. Peterson noticed Sofia's dramatic improvement during a routine checkup. "This is remarkable," he said, studying Sofia's charts with professional confusion. "Has anything changed in her treatment regimen?" Maria's prepared lie rolled off her tongue like practice prayer. "She's been eating better, sleeping more. Sometimes children just have good periods." The doctor's suspicion was academic rather than criminal. He assumed Sofia was one of those statistical anomalies, the rare patient whose body found ways to fight that medical textbooks couldn't explain. Maria let him believe in miracles while she continued creating them with calculated theft. Meanwhile, Helen Bright was beginning to notice patterns that would eventually unravel Maria's carefully constructed world. Helen had been pharmacy director for 8 years, long enough to know when numbers didn't add up. Inventory discrepancies that had seemed random were starting to form shapes, create trends, suggest intention rather than accident. Helen was methodical, approaching the mystery like a detective story she was determined to solve. She began cross-referencing missing medications with shift schedules, comparing theft patterns to employee access, building a case she didn't yet know was against the hospital's most trusted employee. Helen believed in order, in systems, in the kind of accountability that kept hospitals functioning and patients safe. She couldn't imagine that sometimes the greatest threats to those systems came from the purest motivations. By May, Sofia was thriving. She'd returned to school, made new friends, and joined the art club. Her teachers reported that she seemed like a different child, more energetic, more engaged, more alive. The experimental therapy was working exactly as promised, except it wasn't being delivered through legal channels. Sofia's recovery was built on a foundation of criminal love, and every day she grew stronger made Maria's crimes more necessary and more dangerous. The close calls began in June. Helen's investigation was narrowing, and security protocols were tightening. Maria had to take greater risks for the same results, stealing larger quantities less frequently rather than small amounts consistently. Each theft became more terrifying and more essential. Sophia needed her medication like she needed air, and Maria would steal both if necessary to keep her daughter breathing. One night in late June, James almost caught her. Maria was in the pharmacy when he did an unexpected security round, his footsteps echoing through corridors she'd memorized by heart. She barely managed to hide behind the medication shelves, her heart beating so loud she was certain he'd hear it over the pharmacy's mechanical hum. James checked the locks, scanned the room with his flashlight, and moved on, never suspecting that the woman he trusted most was hiding in the shadows. This should have stopped her, but no. A rational criminal would have recognized the escalating danger and found alternative solutions. But Maria wasn't a rational criminal, she was an irrational mother, and Sophia's continued improvement made every risk seem worthwhile, every close call worth the terror. Summer brought Sophia's best months in years. She grew 2 inches, learned to ride the bike Maria had bought second-hand, made friends who didn't know about her condition. Sophia talked about high school, college, traveling the world. Each dream was another vow justified, another theft sanctified by its results. Maria watched her daughter plan a future that stolen medicine was making possible, and the guilt became indistinguishable from gratitude. The stealing had become routine, almost mundane. Maria moved through the pharmacy like she belonged there, taking what Sophia needed with the casual efficiency of someone picking groceries. She'd stopped thinking of it as theft, it was resource allocation, maternal health care, aggressive insurance negotiation. The vocabulary of crime had transformed into the language of necessity. But Helen Bright was closing in, and systems have ways of protecting themselves from even the most loving violations. This is where everything begins to unravel, and if you're on the edge of your seat, make sure you're subscribed because the next part of this story will leave you questioning everything you think you know about justice. Here's what I want to know. Do you think Maria was right to steal medicine to save her daughter, or should she have let Sophia die rather than break the law? The answer might surprise you, and it's about to get a lot more complicated. August 14th marked the beginning of the end, though Maria wouldn't realize it until handcuffs replaced hope as her daily accessory. Helen Bright had spent 3 months building an investigation that would destroy the life of someone she never expected it to be. The pharmacy director had mapped patterns with the precision of a mathematician and the patience of a hunter, and her prey was about to walk directly into a trap built from good intentions and better evidence. Helen had narrowed the thefts to night shift personnel, cross-referenced access codes with missing inventory, and identified a pattern that pointed toward someone with intimate knowledge of hospital routines and pharmaceutical storage. What she hadn't expected was that someone could be the woman everyone described as more honest than a saint, and the hardest worker in the building. The surveillance footage told a story Helen didn't want to believe. Frame by frame, timestamp by timestamp, Maria Femi emerged as the protagonist in a criminal narrative that made no sense until it made perfect sense. The hospital's most trusted employee had been systematically stealing millions of naira worth of medication for 6 months, and she'd done it with the skill of someone who understood both the system she was violating and the consequences of getting caught. But Helen was thorough, and thoroughness demanded she understand motivation before taking action. She began researching Maria's background, expecting to find gambling debts, drug addiction, and financial troubles that would explain such systematic theft. Instead, she discovered Sophia Alene Femi, age 8, diagnosed with Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome, insurance repeatedly denied for experimental treatments that could extend her life. The revelation hit Helen like a physical blow. This wasn't greed or addiction, this was a mother stealing medicine to save her dying child. The black and white morality of theft became complicated by the gray reality of a healthcare system that priced miracles beyond a mother's reach. Helen had children of her own, understood the mathematics of maternal desperation, recognized the impossible choice Maria had been forced to make. For 2 weeks, Helen sat on her evidence, wrestling with consequences that felt too heavy for one person to decide. Report Maria, and a child loses her mother and potentially her life. Don't report her, and Helen becomes complicit in ongoing theft that undermines the systems designed to keep everyone safe. There are some decisions that change you regardless of what you choose, and Helen Wright was about to make one of them. The decision was taken from her hands on August 28 when hospital administration noticed the inventory discrepancies during a routine audit. Helen's careful investigation became evidence in a criminal case she'd hoped to resolve quietly. The machinery of justice began turning with the inexorable efficiency of systems that don't recognize love as a mitigating factor. James Patterson learned the truth in Helen's office, surrounded by surveillance footage that transformed his trust into betrayal. Watching Maria on security monitors, he saw their interactions through new eyes. Every conversation had been a lie, every moment of trust had been exploitation, every act of kindness had been manipulation. The woman he described as having more integrity than the rest of us combined had been stealing medicine while he helped her move equipment and unlock doors. I don't understand, James kept repeating, watching footage of Maria carefully selecting vials from the pharmacy. She never asked for anything. Never seemed desperate. Always talked about how grateful she was for her job. Helen played the audio from earlier that day when Maria had thanked James for helping her fix a broken cartwheel, the same cart she'd used to transport stolen medicine for months. The confrontation came at 11:47 p.m. on September 2nd. James found Maria in the pharmacy, and this time she wasn't hiding. She was standing in front of the medication cabinet with 2 vials in her hands and tears streaming down her face. The weight of 6 months of criminal love had finally become too heavy to carry in secret. I trusted you, James said, and those 3 words carried more accusation than any formal charge ever could. Maria looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months without calculating how to deceive him. She saw the hurt in his eyes, the confusion of someone whose worldview had just shattered, the sadness of someone who genuinely cared about her and discovered that caring had been turned into a weapon. I know, Maria whispered, setting the vials down carefully, as if they were made of hope instead of glass. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to lie to you. But she was dying, James. My little girl was dying, and I couldn't save her legally. The confession poured out like water through a broken tap. 6 months of accumulated guilt, fear, justification, and love spilled into the quiet pharmacy while the security camera recorded every word. Maria told James about Sophia's diagnosis, about the insurance denials, about watching her child waste away while medicine that could save her sat locked 30 feet from where she worked every night. James listened with the expression of someone whose understanding of right and wrong was being reconstructed in real time. He'd been a security guard for 15 years, had arrested shoplifters and drug addicts, had seen every variety of criminal motivation. But he'd never encountered someone who'd committed crimes with such pure intention, such devastating necessity, such complete absence of personal gain. You could have asked for help, James said, though they both knew that wasn't true. Hospital employees couldn't afford 3 million naira experimental treatments any more than single mothers could. The system that employed them both was the same system that priced miracles beyond their collective reach. Who would I ask? Maria replied. The insurance company that denied her coverage. The pharmaceutical company that charges 1 million naira for medicine that costs 30,000 naira to manufacture. The hospital that pays me 50,000 every month to clean up after people who make more in a day than I make in a year. Each question was an indictment of systems that created desperate people and then criminalized their desperation. James had to make a choice that would haunt him forever. Protocol demanded he arrest Maria immediately, call police, and secure evidence. Friendship demanded he give her time to say goodbye to Sophia, to arrange childcare, to prepare for consequences that would destroy what remained of their small family. Humanity demanded he pretend he'd never seen her, never had this conversation, never discovered that trust could be both betrayed and justified simultaneously. He chose protocol, because systems protect themselves even when they create the problems they are designed to solve. The arrest came at dawn, because tragedies have their own sense of timing. Police officers knocked on Maria's door at 6:47 a.m. while Sophia was eating cereal and watching cartoons, blissfully unaware that the medicine that had saved her life was about to cost her the only parent she had left. Maria answered the door already dressed, having spent the night writing letters she hoped Sophia would understand someday. The handcuffs clicked with finality that echoed through the small apartment. Sophia looked up from her cereal, her young mind struggling to process the sight of her mother being arrested while she ate Lucky Charms and watched SpongeBob. "Mommy, what's happening?" she asked with the voice of a child who'd already survived too much but wasn't prepared for this kind of loss. "I have to go away for a while, my love," Maria said, kneeling to Sophia's eye level while the officers waited with the patience of seeing how emotionally it is for her and Sophia. "But Mrs. Monica the next door will take care of you, and I'll be back as soon as I can. Remember what I've always told you, everything I've ever done has been because I love you more than life itself." Sophia nodded with the solemnity of a child forced to become an adult in a single moment. She hugged her mother with the desperate strength of someone who instinctively understood this might be their last embrace for a long time. "I love you too, Mommy. Will I still get my medicine?" The question shattered every heart in the room, because an 8-year-old child shouldn't have to worry about whether her arrest of her mother would interrupt the treatment keeping her alive. Maria looked at the officers, at Sophia, at the small apartment that had been their world, and wondered if love could ever truly justify the choices it forced you to make. As they led Maria away in handcuffs, Sophia pressed her face against the window, watching her mother walk into a police car while neighbors whispered behind curtains and strangers stopped and watched and took notes. The quiet woman who cleaned hospital floors had become the criminal who'd stolen medicine to save her daughter, and the world was about to judge whether love could ever excuse theft, whether desperation could ever justify crime, whether a mother's heart could ever be held to the same standards as the law. If this story is breaking your heart the way it's breaking mine, please subscribe and share it, because this is about more than one mother's choice. It's about a system that forces impossible decisions on people who can't afford miracles. My question for you: should Maria Femi go to prison for stealing medicine to save her daughter's life? Comment below, because her story is about to challenge everything you believe about justice. The courtroom felt like a cathedral built for judgment rather than worship, its high ceilings and formal architecture designed to make ordinary people feel small in the face of institutional authority. Maria Femi sat at the defendant's table wearing the same clothes she'd worn to parent-teacher conferences and doctor appointments, because criminal defendants don't get special wardrobes and justice doesn't pause for shopping trips. She looked like what she'd always been, a working mother who'd exhausted legal options and discovered that love doesn't respect boundaries drawn by systems that prize hope beyond a poor woman's reach. The charges read like a grocery list of crimes: theft, burglary, possession of stolen property, fraud. Each count represented months of stolen medicine, thousands of dollars in missing inventory, hundreds of nights when Maria had chosen her daughter's life over society's laws. The prosecutor presented evidence with mechanical precision: surveillance footage, inventory reports, financial calculations that reduced Maria's love to mere numbers on spreadsheets. But numbers tell incomplete stories, and Maria's defense attorney understood that this case would be decided by heart as much as evidence. Sarah Adewale had taken Maria's case pro bono after reading about it in the newspaper, recognizing that some stories transcend legal technicalities and enter the realm of human truth. Sarah had children of her own and understood the mathematics of maternal desperation, the way love could transform law-abiding citizens into criminals with pure motivations. The prosecution painted Maria as a common thief who'd exploited trust and stolen property regardless of motivation. Theft is theft, District Attorney Morrison declared with the certainty of someone who'd never watched their child dying while medicine sat locked away by insurance bureaucrats. We cannot allow sympathy to excuse criminal behavior, or desperation to justify theft. The defendant had legal options: charity care, payment plans, fundraising, but chose crime instead. Legal options. Maria almost laughed at the phrase, because she'd exhausted every legal option available to poor people in a system designed to exhaust them. Charity care applications denied due to technicalities. Payment plans that would take 30 years to afford 6 months of treatment. Fundraising efforts that raised hundreds when she needed hundreds of thousands. The prosecution spoke of alternatives as if they were real choices rather than bureaucratic mirages designed to make systemic failures look like personal shortcomings. Sarah Adewale's defense strategy was simple: tell the truth and trust that human beings could recognize love when they saw it, even when it wore criminal clothing. She called Dr. Peterson to testify about Sophia's condition and prognosis, explaining the progression of Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome in terms that made the jury understand they were dealing with a child whose body was racing toward death while insurance companies conducted careful reviews of experimental treatments. Without treatment, Sophia had perhaps 6 months to live, Dr. Peterson testified with clinical compassion. With the experimental therapy, she could potentially live into her 20s or beyond. The medication the defendant stole was specifically designed for her daughter's condition and was having remarkably positive effects on Sophia's health and development. The doctor's testimony transformed abstract legal concepts into concrete human reality. This wasn't theft for personal gain, this was a mother stealing time with her daughter, purchasing years of life with criminal acts that made moral sense even when they violated legal boundaries. Every vial Maria had taken represented days, weeks, months that Sophia would get to be a child instead of a dying patient. Helen Bright took the stand with visible reluctance, called as a prosecution witness who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. She testified about her investigation with professional competence but without the vindictive satisfaction typically expected from crime victims. Helen described Maria as methodical, careful, and selective in what she took, painting a picture of someone who'd approach theft with surgical precision rather than desperate abandon. Did you consider the defendant's motivation when you discovered her identity? Sarah Adewale asked during cross-examination, and Helen's answer revealed the complexity of prosecuting crimes committed for pure reasons. I have children, Helen said simply. When I learned about Sophia's condition, about the insurance denials, about the cost of treatment, I understood why Maria Femi made the choices she did. I didn't agree with them legally, but I understood them humanly. The jury saw footage of Sophia before and after her mother's crimes began. The before photos showed a frail child with the physical appearance of someone much older, her body ravaged by a condition that aged her 8 times faster than normal. The after photos revealed a transformed child, stronger, healthier, more vibrant, more alive. Maria's theft had literally given Sophia back her childhood, and the jury could see the miraculous results of criminal love with their own eyes. James Patterson testified with the reluctant honesty of someone whose trust had been betrayed but whose understanding had been expanded. He described Maria as the most reliable employee he'd ever worked with, someone who'd never missed a day or asked for special treatment, someone who'd shown more integrity than colleagues who'd never committed crimes. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The most honest person in the hospital had been forced to become a criminal to save her child. She used my trust against me, James acknowledged, but she did it for reasons I can't completely condemn. If my grandchild was dying and I had access to medicine that could save her, I'd like to think I'd find a legal solution. But if legal solutions didn't exist, if the system failed my family completely, I can't say I wouldn't make the same choice Maria Femi made. Sophia herself never testified. 8-year-olds don't belong in courtrooms passing the criminal implications of their mother's love, but her presence filled the trial like a ghost of possibilities. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every legal argument circled back to a single question: what is Sophia Femi worth? What price do we put on a child's life? Who gets to decide whether some lives are too expensive to save? The prosecution's closing argument focused on rule of law, systemic protection, the necessity of maintaining boundaries that prevent society from descending into chaos where everyone becomes their own judge of what rules apply to their situation. If we excuse theft because of good intentions, Morrison argued, we excuse all theft by people who believe their cause is just. We cannot have a system of laws that applies differently based on motivation. Sarah Adewale's closing argument was a masterpiece of legal storytelling that transformed a criminal trial into a referendum on healthcare inequality, systemic failure, and the prices we place on human life. She didn't deny Maria's crimes, she contextualized them within systems that created desperate people and then criminalized their desperation. Maria Femi is guilty of theft, Sarah told the jury, but she's guilty of stealing medicine to save her dying daughter while pharmaceutical companies steal hope by pricing miracles beyond a mother's reach. She's guilty of breaking locks while insurance companies break hearts with denial letters that sentence children to death. She's guilty of violating laws while our healthcare system violates human dignity by making poverty a death sentence for sick children. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, wrestling with questions that had no clean answers. Is love a defense for crime? Can desperation justify theft? Should mothers watch their children die rather than break laws that protect property more than lives? When they returned, the foreman read a verdict that satisfied no one completely but recognized the complexity of judging crimes committed for pure reasons, guilty on all counts, with a recommendation for mercy that acknowledged both the illegality of Maria's actions and the desperation that drove them. Judge Margaret William had been on the bench for 23 years and had sentenced hundreds of criminals for thousands of crimes, but Maria Femi presented a sentencing challenge that kept her awake for weeks. The law demanded punishment for theft, but justice demanded recognition that some crimes emerge from systemic failures rather than personal failings. How do you sentence someone whose crime was loving their child too much in a system that didn't love them enough? The sentence reflected judicial wisdom earned through decades of seeing how laws intersect with human lives. Guilty as charged, sentenced to 1 year of community service to be served at Sacred Heart Hospital, working with families navigating insurance denials and medication access issues. Maria would return to the same hospital where she'd committed her crimes, but this time as an advocate helping other desperate families fight legally for their children's lives. The court recognizes, Judge Williams said, that while the defendants' actions were unquestionably illegal, they emerged from a healthcare system that places profit above patients and prices hope beyond the reach of working families. Maria Santos Femi medicine to save her daughter's life, and while we cannot excuse theft, we can work to address the systemic failures that make such desperate choices necessary. Sophia was in the courtroom for the sentencing, holding her mother's hand as justice tried to balance law with love, punishment with understanding. She'd grown 3 inches since her mother's arrest, continued taking medication provided through an emergency compassionate use program that the trial's publicity had pressured the pharmaceutical company to establish. Maria's crimes had not only saved Sophia's life, they'd inadvertently created a program that would help other children access experimental treatments. The irony was perfect. Maria's theft had exposed systemic failures so clearly that the system had been forced to create legal solutions that hadn't existed when desperation drove her to crime. Her lawbreaking had ultimately changed laws, her criminal acts had created compassionate programs, her individual theft had highlighted institutional failures that needed addressing. As they walked out of the courthouse together, Maria and Sophia faced a future shaped by criminal love and systematic change. Maria would spend the next several years helping other families navigate the same impossible choices she'd faced, using her experience as both criminal and victim to guide desperate parents through legal labyrinths designed to exhaust rather than assist them. Sophia continued thriving on medication that was now legally accessible through programs Maria's prosecution had inadvertently created. She started high school at the appropriate age, made friends who didn't know her medical history, planned a future that criminal love had made possible and legal changes had secured. The mother's great crime had been stealing medicine to save her dying daughter. The system's great crime had been pricing miracles beyond a mother's reach and then criminalizing her love when she refused to accept her child's death. Both crimes found redemption in changes that ensured other families wouldn't face the same impossible choices: steal medicine or watch children die, break laws or break hearts, choose between love and legality in systems that should never force such choices. Maria Femi became a symbol of how individual acts of criminal love could expose institutional failures and create systematic changes. Her theft had been illegal, but it had also been necessary. Her crime had been wrong, but it had also been right. Her choice had been criminal, but it had also been holy. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share it, because Maria's story continues every day in hospitals where desperate families face impossible choices. This isn't just about one mother's crime, it's about all of us, and the world we're building for our children. Thank you for listening to the story of love, law, and the price of miracles. What crimes would you commit to save someone you love? Let me know in the comments, and remember, sometimes the greatest crimes are committed by the purest heart. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and comment. This is Tales in the Day by NK. Till I come your way again. Bye.